Imagine the city that created the most feared warriors of antiquity. Now imagine that same city being crushed, humiliated, forgotten, not by the gods, but by another even more ruthless power, Rome. Yes, Sparta has fallen. And it wasn't just a military defeat, it was the end of an era. You are about to understand how a people who claimed to be invincible were brought to their knees before the Roman advance. Don't blink, because in the next few seconds we'll reveal the story that almost no one tells, the exact moment when Rome destroyed the Spartan myth and rewrote the fate of Greece forever. For this, we need to go back in time. Sparta, famous for its ruthless discipline and its legendary army, dominated the Greek world for centuries. But like all powers, its glory began to crumble, and this silent collapse began even before the Romans. It all began in the year 371 BC on a plain called Leuctra. For centuries, Sparta seemed unshaken. His warriors knew no fear, his discipline was almost superhuman, and his name sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest hearts. But on July 6th, 371 BC, all that began to crumble. The plain of Leuctra in the Boeotia region was the scene of the battle that would forever alter the balance of power in ancient Greece. Sparta's army, led by King Cleombrotus I, found itself face to face with a smaller but boldly innovative force, the Thebans, commanded by Epaminondas. Sparta relied on its brute strength and its undefeated tradition. But the Thebans had something new, a tactic never seen before, and worse, courage to face a myth. With only about 7,500 men against the nearly 12,000 Spartans, Thebes launched a withering attack. King Cleombrotus then was killed in combat, something that had not happened to a Spartan king for more than a century. With the death of the king, trust collapsed. Sparta's ranks shattered like glass under pressure. The myth was beginning to bleed. If this kind of story has already hooked you so far, imagine what comes next. So enjoy, subscribe to the channel, and leave the like. This helps to keep these forgotten memories of humanity alive. Sparta's defeat at Leuctra was not just military, it was psychological. For the first time in centuries, the Greek world saw the impossible happen. Sparta fell to its knees. The losses were heavy. Estimates indicate that between 1,000 and 4,000 Spartan soldiers died, while the Thebans accounted for only about 300 casualties. But what shook Hellas the most was not the number of bodies, but the collapse of the myth. From then on, a new hegemony was born. Thebes took the place that had previously belonged to Sparta, at least for a brief moment. Epaminondas, with his tactical genius, opened a new chapter in the war. And this chapter would be read carefully by another people growing up in the distance, the Romans. Meanwhile, Sparta was trying to get back on its feet, but its domain was already doomed to be a shadow of what it was. The polis that once ruled with iron and fear now dealt with internal distrust, loss of external prestige, and the advance of new powers. And as the Greek world fragmented, a silent force on the horizon was already preparing to take it all. Your name? Rome. While the Greeks were digesting the rubble of Spartan hegemony, Rome was already marching in another direction, to the top of the world. In the 2nd century BC, Rome was no longer just a regional power. After crushing Carthage in the Second Punic War and defeating Hannibal, the Roman Republic became the master of the Western Mediterranean. But that was just the beginning. Roman eyes now turned to the east, and there was Greece, fragmented, vulnerable, riven by internal rivalries, and scarred by centuries of disputes between city-states like Athens, Thebes, Sparta, and Corinth. It was the perfect setting for a new domination. While the Greeks were still deluded by ideals of autonomy and ancestral honor, Rome offered something more practical: Diplomatic agreements, military aid, and behind it all, control. Each Roman ring came with a price. Each call for help became an invisible chain. And the cities that resisted, they quickly learned that resisting Rome was costly, very expensive. The Roman giant was approaching, and Greece was about to be swallowed up by an empire that believed not in myths, but in absolute power. Rome knew how to conquer without always having to fight. With his diplomatic shrewdness, he began to infiltrate the internal politics of Greek cities. First, it offered military aid against common enemies. Then, it demanded influence on internal decisions. It was a silent but lethal tactic. The city-states, increasingly weakened by internal disputes and historical resentments, opened their doors to Rome without realizing that they were also surrendering their freedom. Sparta, Thebes, Athens, all of them, in some way, ended up involved in this political chess game. The Achaean League, a confederation of cities that tried to maintain the unity and autonomy of Greece, began to realize too late that the real enemy was not among them, but outside. While the Romans became protectors, Greece was becoming a puppet. Rome offered security, but took sovereignty. He created alliances, but sowed submission. And the more the Greek cities fought each other, the more Rome strengthened its hold on them. The Hellenic world's time was running out, and Rome, with its disciplined legions and its hunger for power, was preparing the final blow. Tension exploded when the Achaean League, feeling cornered and humiliated by constant Roman interference, made a desperate decision to attack Sparta. An unthinkable choice. Sparta at that time was an ally of Rome, and attacking an ally of Rome was the same as declaring war on the empire itself. It was the spark that Rome was waiting for, and as always, when Rome was provoked, his response was relentless. The Roman Senate did not hesitate. He appointed the consul Lucius Mummius Achaicus to lead the punitive campaign. Their mission was clear: to crush resistance, destroy the Achaean League, and end any hope of Greek independence. And Mummius was not a negotiator. He was an executioner. He marched his legions through Greece like a storm, devastating every city that stood in its way. The Achaean armies, disorganized and divided, stood no chance against the brutal precision of the Roman legions. Greece, once the cradle of philosophy, the arts, and refined warfare, now watched helplessly as a force advanced that did not recite Homer. It merely obeyed orders and won battles. Lucius Mummius' advanced culminated in the city of Corinth, the beating heart of Greek resistance. It was the symbol of an ancient culture, rich, refined, proud. And it was there that Rome decided to leave its cruelest mark. Corinth was surrounded, invaded, and completely destroyed. Nothing was spared. Temples were plundered, wealth confiscated, men executed or enslaved. Women and children were sold as merchandise. The city was set on fire, its libraries erased, its statues broken. Roma didn't just want to win. He wanted to humiliate, eradicate, turn the memory into ashes. The destruction of Corinth was a warning. No city, no matter how glorious its past, would escape Roman authority. It was the end of Greek independence, the end of a world. The Achaean League was dissolved, and with it, the last breath of freedom of the Hellenic people. Greece has been reconfigured, incorporated into the empire as a province. What was once a mosaic of proud cultures was now just another piece under Rome's rule, and the sound of the fall was heard throughout history. And what happened to Sparta, the one that for centuries was the terror of Greece? It was not destroyed like Corinth. It was not set on fire, nor reduced to dust. Sparta survived, but only because it was already surrendered. Because he supported Rome, at the right time, he escaped the wrath of Lucius Mummius. But the price for this clemency was high. his soul. Sparta was incorporated into Roman rule, losing what little autonomy it still preserved. There were no more hoplites marching through the mountains, no agoges molding boys into warriors. The spirit of Leonidas had been filed in the books. The temples were still standing, but the swords were guarded. The city became a decorative symbol, useful for Romans who admired the past, but no longer posed a threat. Sparta became an echo, visited by onlookers, remembered in speeches, but unable to interfere in the real world. The Romans knew the symbolic value of Sparta, but they also knew that it was no longer dangerous. He was like a stuffed lion, imposing at first glance, but unable to roar. In the centuries that followed, Sparta disappeared from the center of political decision-making. The one that once defied Athens, defeated empires, and forged heroes has become a peripheral city, irrelevant to the affairs of the empire. Its military system was dismantled. Their youth were no longer trained to die in combat, but to pay taxes. The city, now under Roman control, was witnessing its own transformation. Temples once dedicated to war became tourist sites, and the few remaining citizens told ancient stories as distant legends. Sparta became a symbol of the past, respected but surpassed. Meanwhile, Rome absorbed everything it could of Greek culture, architecture, philosophy, religion, art. But under the weight of the Roman legion, Greece ceased to be a protagonist and became only an enlightened province of a brutally efficient empire. Rome did not erase Greece, he only rewrote it. And Sparta, once feared and immortalized, now slept under the shade of an eagle. No voice, no army, no future. Sparta did not fall with swords through its heart. It fell through time, through politics, through the advance of a force that did not respect ancient glories. Rome didn't need to prove that it was better. She just marched. And when he marched, the world changed. Greece, with all its philosophy, its art, and its history, was bent by Roman practicality and brutality. Independence became a memory, cities became provinces, and the heroes, statues. Sparta survived, yes, but only as an idea frozen in time. There were no more invincible armies, just tourists touring silent ruins. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson of all. No power is eternal. No glory is protected from oblivion. Rome would one day fall too. But while he was standing, he was able to do the impossible. Silence Sparta. And when you look at today's empires, remember, every giant has a heel, and every myth an end. History does not forgive those who stop in time. And Sparta stopped. The fall of Sparta reminds us that even the most feared empires can turn to dust. If this story impacted you, if you learned something new, or were simply transported for a few minutes to the past, so reciprocate. Leave the like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who also loves the story. Because when we know the past, we understand the present better.